Avengers Endgame is an incredible conclusion to the 22 films of the MCU, which has spanned the course of an entire decade. Closing out with one of the most incredible and emotional finales of the entire series, we're given plenty of hints and teasers for what's to come in the franchise's next phase and potential saga. In this video, I'll break down the ending of Endgame character by character and discuss my thoughts on the future of the MCU. Before we get into this, it absolutely goes without saying that this video contains enormous spoilers. If you haven't watched the movie, why on earth have you clicked on this video in the first place? Turn it off right now and come back after you've seen it. That said, this video does not aim to spoil the movie for people who haven't seen it, but rather offer commentary for those who have. Alright, final warning, let's get into it. Let's start at the most obvious place with Tony Stark, who at movie's end sacrifices himself for the good of the universe and dies while eradicating Thanos and his army. This is a pretty definite ending for Stark, and it wraps up his character arc nicely. He started us all on this journey in 2008's Iron Man as a selfish and erratic playboy, and now leads the charge in closing it out as a selfless hero. What I love in this was Stark's ability to somewhat make amends with his father in the time travel sequence and finally say his goodbyes. Having made peace with his past and aided in the longevity of the future, Stark dies finally at solace with his own mind. It seems pretty obvious that we won't be getting any more Iron Man movies in the near future, although Stark does leave behind Pepper Potts and a daughter, Morgan Stark. Potts does debut in the rescue armor aiding the Avengers in the final fight, though I highly doubt Gwyneth Paltrow would be able to carry a superhero franchise or would really want to continue on in the MCU in such a large capacity. Remember, she's been here from the very beginning as well. It's certainly possible that Morgan Stark will grow up and take on the role of the new Iron Man, much like Riri Williams in the comics, or perhaps simply inherit her mother's rescue armor, but at such a young age, this isn't something I can see happening imminently, within the next decade of films at least, unless Marvel wants to make another enormous time jump. Harley Keener, the kid from Iron Man 3, does make a very brief appearance at Stark's funeral, which, as per fan speculation that has persisted these last 6 years, could also bring him back into the spotlight to take up the Iron Man mantle. But honestly, if at all, I would rather see the mantle handed to a Stark. I think this is probably just a small nod back to Iron Man 3 than anything major. All this said, Iron Man is Marvel's biggest selling character, and I'm not sure they're going to want to keep him or her out of the spotlight for too long. Steve Rogers is the next big one, and he certainly gets a happier ending than Stark. Rogers, of course, proves himself worthy in the final battle by wielding the mighty Mjolnir, fighting side by side with Thor. Thor even quips that he knew it all along, a great nod to this moment from Age of Ultron. Using the quantum realm to return the stones to their rightful timelines, Rogers takes the chance to make a divergent into the past to reclaim his lost love with Peggy Carter, shown in a final scene where Rogers and Carter finally get their promised dance. Instead of returning to the current timeline, Rogers stays, bringing some closure to Rogers' complicated life and making a nice throwback to this scene from Age of Ultron.
The simple life.
You get there one day.
I don't know. Family, stability. Guy who wanted all that went in the ice 75 years ago. I think someone else came out.
Rogers lives out an entire existence, marrying Carter and likely just laying low and living the simple life. Back in the main timeline, Rogers reappears after Tony Stark's funeral in the distance as an old man. Approached by Sam Wilson, Cap unveils his shield and asks him to try it on, passing on the torch of Captain America. Of course, fans have debated over the last few years about who would take up the mantle of Captain America after Chris Evans steps away from the role, with both Bucky Barnes and Wilson having done time as Captain America at various points in the comics. Now it seems that we have our definitive answer. Sam Wilson will make the transition from Falcon to Captain America in the MCU, in a move which takes its roots from the Captain America No More comic arc, which sees an old man Cap naming Wilson as his successor. Most interesting thing here is that Wilson and Barnes have both been announced to be starring in the upcoming Disney Plus streaming service series Falcon and the Winter Soldier, set within the the MCU. Both Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan have been confirmed to star, and the show is looking at a 2020 debut on the service. So this begs the question, will Falcon and the Winter Soldier be a prequel series spanning the time between Civil War and Infinity War, while Wilson also heads a new series of post-Endgame Captain America movies, or will Marvel soon announce that they'll be rebranding Falcon and the Winter Soldier as Captain America and the Winter Soldier? To me, the latter certainly makes the most sense. I couldn't understand why Marvel would be heading up two properties using the same character under two different superhero aliases at the one time. That would be very, very confusing. And while it would make sense for Wilson to star in a new slate of Captain America cinematic adventures, imagine the kind of traffic a Captain America limited series would bring to Disney+. That said, it's also quite possible that Falcon and the Winter Soldier will be set post-Endgame and span the period it takes Wilson to transition into the new mantle for a new series of movies to then spin out of. No matter what's next, we know the MCU will not be without its captain going forward. After the battle against Thanos, Thor on the other hand returns to New Asgard and steps away from his role as king after also being given the chance to make amends with his past. Feeling that the community needs a new leader to bring order to it in a way that he could not, he hands the rule of Asgard to Valkyrie, who now takes on the role of Queen of New Asgard. Thor then not only leaves New Asgard, but joins the Guardians of the Galaxy, or as he dubs them, the Asgardians of the Galaxy, where he will assist in new cosmic adventures. So this here is twofold. Firstly, we know that there's definitely a Guardians of the Galaxy 3 happening in the next phase, a script is completed, and filming could start within the next year with James Gunn back at the helm. It looks very, very likely that Thor will join the Guardians for their last hurrah in an adventure that looks to see them searching the galaxy for Gamora. Of course, the Gamora from the main MCU timeline faced a finite death, however, somewhere out there, Gamora from the past is still around. The last scene of the movie with the Guardians sees Quill tracking her on board the ship. It makes sense that Chris Hemsworth will be continuing on in the role of Thor for at least one more movie. Out of the core group of the original Avengers, he's the only one who's been regularly outspoken publicly about his desire to continue on in the franchise post-Endgame, especially considering his newfound love for the revamped character following Ragnarok. I think that it's very possible that Guardians 3 will see Thor in his final cinematic adventure, assisting Quill, Drax, Nebula, Rocket, and Groot in their plight to find Gamora. This team-up is certainly something that fans have been clamoring for ever since Infinity War. Of course, Thor has fought side by side with the Guardians many times in the comics, so this will be incredibly exciting to see play out on the big screen. So that just leaves Valkyrie. Will she get her own movie, Valkyrie Queen of Asgard, or will she join Thor as a character in Guardians 3? Valkyrie in the comics is more closely associated with the Defenders team-up, though in a current series of comics, she does in fact head a lineup known as Asgardians of the Galaxy. Is it possible that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will in fact be an Asgardians of the Galaxy movie featuring both Thor and Valkyrie and perhaps Korg and Meek teaming up with the Guardians? Or is this something that could eventuate in a fourth Thor movie? In fact, Tessa Thompson has been on the record recently speaking about a Thor 4 pitch that has been given to Marvel by Taika Waititi, the director of Ragnarok. But with so many shady answers and purposeful misinformation surrounding the publicity campaign for Endgame, this really should be taken with a massive grain of salt. I imagine it's probably more likely that Valkyrie will head her own movie or limited series on Disney Plus than Marvel producing Thor 4 when their usual template is a solid trilogy for each character, but I am certainly betting on the Asgardians of the Galaxy. Bruce Banner, on the other hand, is left in a very interesting position. He's learned to control the Hulk so well that he can now think, verbalize, and act as if human, much like Professor Hulk in the comics. Banner's story is left a little open-ended here. He's reeling off the finite death of Natasha, but as far as his future is concerned, there's nothing really hinted at here. This is possibly due to the fact that Marvel can't make a solo Hulk film without Universal Studios distributing it, and they possibly don't want to set him up for an outing that couldn't ever happen. My guess is, just as he has the last few years, Banner Banner and Hulk will likely show up in someone else's film down the line. With such strong ties to Valkyrie and Thor at this point, maybe he'll join the Guardians on their next adventure too. Speaking of Natasha, sadly Black Widow reached a finite death in this film, not even being resurrected for the final battle scene, which I thought was a little bit sad. Of course, we've been hearing plenty about this upcoming Black Widow film, which will launch in Phase 4, so we haven't seen the last of Natasha just yet. Following Endgame, it's unlikely that the Black Widow solo film would take place in its aftermath, considering she's dead, but rather be a prequel. My personal predictions would either set this movie early in her career, exploring her time in the Red Room, or maybe even team her up with Clint Barton, where we finally get to experience their mission in Budapest, which was referred to way back in the first Avengers film, and even hinted at again in Endgame. Massive possibility that the Budapest incident was dropped in Endgame simply to set up this new adventure. Additionally, Hawkeye has been rumored to be getting his own Disney Plus series where he'll be training up the next Hawkeye, which I think could be pretty interesting. During Endgame, we do witness Barton training up his daughter in archery, even calling her Hawkeye. It is a possibility that this series could see Barton's daughter taking up the mantle in the way that the young Kate Bishop has in the comics. Two more characters set for a Disney Plus series are of course Scarlet Witch and Vision in the upcoming WandaVision. Now, we know that Wanda is back at full force in the Endgame finale, but having not returned from an apparent finite death, the Vision is nowhere to be seen. This said, it's looking very likely that WandaVision will be a prequel and probably find itself set between the events of Civil War and Infinity War, exploring the blossoming relationship of the two characters. One of my favourite classic comic arcs and limited series is that of the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, and I would love this series to take inspiration from that. It could be really fun, really quirky, and really exciting as a long-form series. Loki will find himself with his own Disney Plus series as well, which has previously been insinuated to be a prequel spanning thousands of years of Loki's lifetime of mischievousness. This would certainly make sense considering in the current timeline, Loki is another one who has found himself dead. That said, I just can't help myself but hope for a series focused on an alt-reality Loki, following him after stealing the Tesseract during the Avengers time travel sequence. Look, I think it's probably very unlikely that with such a grand culmination of the Infinity Saga, Marvel would use Infinity Stones again to drive a narrative, so this probably won't be the case. As for some of the other characters, with all of the fallen having risen again, we'll first follow Peter Parker on his next adventure in Spider-Man Far From Home, due in cinemas in July 2019. The finale of Endgame sees Parker reunited with his school pals, ready to be sent off on a global adventure, which will also see the reappearance of Nick Fury, Maria Hill, and Happy Hogan. Black Panther, Shuri, Okoye, M'Baku, and the Wakandans take solace on a once more peaceful Wakanda in the lead up to Black Panther 2, another film that we've heard a little bit of lately, which is set to be directed by the first film's director Ryan Coogler. Doctor Strange and Wong once again return to the New York Sanctum as Guardians of the Realms, leading to a rumored Doctor Strange 2, which once again we've heard murmurings about in the past. Likewise, Carol Danvers is set to go forth into a series of Captain Marvel movies, where she's already been pegged to be the new face of the MCU's future, like it or not. With Danvers currently alive and stronger than ever in the post-Endgame timeline, it's possible that we could follow her adventures as an Avenger after the events of the movie, though with a 20-something year gap spanning the end of the first Captain Marvel and the beginning of Endgame, there's such a large sandbox that Marvel could possibly play around in with this character, and I'm really excited to see what they do with her in the future. Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne are another pair whose future seems pretty uncertain. Of course, they're both reunited at the end along with Hank and Janet Pym, and while it is possible that the four could head off on a third outing, I'm really unsure what the future could hold for them. The movie doesn't really give us any hints, and with the lackluster box office takings of Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'm unsure a third Lang-Pym adventure is even on the cards. However, as founding members of the Avengers in the comics, it would certainly be very exciting to see the Pyms along with the Langs head up a new lineup of Avengers. This is probably just a pipe dream, but I would love to see an A-Force movie focusing on all the feisty females of the MCU. These gals are an awesome force, and the comics are a whole lot of fun. The momentary glimpse that we got of an all-female team-up in the finale was one of the highlights of the film for me, and I would certainly like to think that it is foreshadowing greater plans for the A-Force in the near future. Another thing worth a mention is the seemingly unimportant big earthquake under the ocean that is mentioned during one of the Avengers team-up meetings. This event is brushed off as something that doesn't need to be handled. However, call me crazy, but could this be a small teaser for an upcoming Namor movie? Namor the Submariner is Marvel's oldest hero ever, first debuting in April of 1939, before Marvel were even officially Marvel. So it seems about time that he finally gets his dues on the big screen after all this time. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Namor, and I feel like releasing a Submariner film so close to DC's Aquaman could be a bit of a risk, but if anyone could pull it off, it's certainly Marvel. And I hope that there is many more new characters as we move into this next saga of the franchise. The bigger this universe gets, the better in my personal opinion. And at that is all I have to say, so I'm gonna throw it over to you guys. What did you think of the ending of Endgame? Was it everything you ever wanted, or were you disappointed? Were you surprised, or did you find it incredibly predictable? And finally, what do you personally want to see next in the MCU? Fire away in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. If this is your first time viewing one of my videos, you like what you've seen, you'd like to see more like this in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen right now, and also hit that like button down below if you're feeling extra generous. Also, don't forget to check out my many social media accounts, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day.